Hello, my name is Serif, and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. Now this is an adaptation of a digital photo magazine tutorial which shows you how to make a false starry sky for your images, like this one here, which I actually made up from a daylight shot of this house where I've erased the skyline and a starry sky background which I made using this tutorial, and then putting them together and then altering the levels of the house image to make it look more like a nighttime shot. I have finished up with this finished result. Now this is going to be a tutorial that is for PhotoPlus, but I'm also going to have to do one for Serif's new program, Affinity Photo. Now I'm not 100% certain yet whether this is going to be two separate videos or whether, depending on the length of these videos, whether I'm going to sort of tack them together to make one long video. If I do that, roughly about this point, I will add a call out that will show you at what point time-wise in this video the Affinity Photo version of the tutorial will start, so you can just skip along to that point and avoid having to watch the PhotoPlus part. So let us get on with the PhotoPlus part of this tutorial. So we need to make a new document, and the size will be 1920 by 1080 and 300 resolution. Just click OK. Okay, next thing we want to do is to make a new layer above this. So we come down to the layers display area down here, and on this white square with a cross in it, if you click on that, you can make a new layer. You can name it if you want, but I'm not going to bother. And then, so we now have a new blank layer which we are going to flood fill, which is this tool here, with black, and black is already set as my foreground color. So when I click on that, we have the new layer in black, and then what we need to do now is to add some noise to this layer, and to do that we come up to the effects menu, noise, add noise, and you want your percentage slider to be up to 100%, and if you have a little dot in uniform, click into Gaussian to make sure that Gaussian is the option we're using and that monochromatic has a tick in it. This will make sure that all the noise is just white and not various colors, and then just click OK. And then what we need to do now is to right click this layer here and duplicate it. Again, I'm not going to bother naming it. So then we have two versions of that layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this layer by clicking on this little dot here and then coming down to highlight the layer below, so that we are working on this layer and not the layer above. And I'm going to add some blur to this, so it's effects, blur, Gaussian blur. Now it should pretty much be set on 0.5, which I think is the default setting, so we'll leave it at that. and we'll just click OK. So the thing we need to do now after that is to reduce the amount of noise that is here, and we're going to do that by using the levels tool. Now I'm not going to use the levels tool as a new layer. I'm going to use it as a tool in its own right, just so it affects just this layer. And once doing it this way, I won't be able to come back and alter it again later, but as I know where I want the settings to be, that is not a problem. So I'm going to come to Image, Adjust, and Levels, or you can use Control, Shift and E. Now you can just bring this right upward arrow towards the right, and it will reduce the amount of noise just by making the background a bit darker. But as I know where I want this to be, I'm going to type in that I want the input to be 200 and the gamma I want to be 0.800, and the output I will leave at 0. And then click OK. So there we already have a starry sky image. Now, me personally, I would come up to File, Export, and export this image as it stands. So you have one version of a starry sky already. We'll probably end up with 3, maybe 4 different versions, so you can then decide which one to use with your images depending on the image you're going to use. So my advice is to export it at every point, so you have different versions of this starry sky. So I'm assuming you have now exported that, and we can now move on. So we now need to make this top layer visible again, and click on the layer to highlight it, and now we are going to again add some blur, Gaussian blur, but this time we are going to raise the radius up to 2 pixels or thereabouts, and then click OK. And again we're going to use the levels tool, so image, adjust, levels, and this time we're going to move this in to the right, towards the right, and we want to move it to about roughly about 120. A lot of it depends on what you want to, what the end result that you want, and then move the white arrow towards the left, and we want to come to about 140-ish, because this is now making the white dots brighter. So I've got mine set on 123 and 140, and I'll just click OK. So again, at this point I would advise you to export the image as it stands, because using export, it will just export what you are seeing on screen and not worry about any layers that are below it. So now you would have two different versions of this starry sky image. So once you have exported that and saved it, we can now move along. Now, believe it or not, we are not really going to be keeping this top layer. We are just going to be using it as a way of selecting these dots to add to the layers below. Sounds a little bit confusion, but hopefully you will understand what I mean. So what we're going to do next is we're going to select the magic wand tool, which is about the fifth icon, sixth icon down here on the left. Just click on that, and we want to make sure that contiguous here doesn't have a tick in it, and we're going to set the tolerance to 50. And then I'm going to zoom in quite a long way and pick, I mean you can go, where am I on? I'm currently on 700%, but and then pick one of the brightest white dots in the area that you're looking at, and then click on that, and as you can see it's selected various dots around the screen. Some of them haven't been selected, it's only selected the really bright ones. I mean, if you wanted to select a different batch of dots, you can. If you come up to add to selection, click on that, you could then pick one of the other ones. Let's try this one. So as you can see, it's now picked a few more of those dots, and now I can zoom out again, and as you can see, all those ones that it is selected have now got the little selection I can't remember what to call it, outline around each of those dots. So what we're going to do now is to make a new blank layer above this layer here. So again, just come down to that button there, make a new layer, and we are going to flood fill this with white. So click on flood fill, and then assuming that your colors are black and white, if you click on this arrow it will switch white round to being your foreground color, and then you can click on that layer. Now it does look like nothing has happened. That's because white has only just filled the selected areas, not the whole image. I mean, if I delete, or not delete, but hide that layer, as you can see, those filled selected areas are now added to the layer 1 skies. So I can now just press Ctrl and D to remove the selected areas. So now you have these dots or stars added to the bottom layer, which looks like that. So you can now highlight this layer here, right click and delete it. So all you've got is these two layers now, And sorry, I've lost my way here slightly. I've got to read my notes. Blah blah blah. Control D. Yes. Right. So now with the top blank layer highlighted, I can come down to the Effects tab button, which is again down here in the Layers display area, and it will open up the Layers effects. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to put a tick in Outer Glow, like so, and I'm just going to, well, it's already set on the yellow, but if you didn't, yours isn't set to yellow, you can click on that box and then let's make it a different yellow, a slightly brighter yellow. Yeah, it's already set on an opacity of 75, but I'm going to push it up to 100. The blend mode needs to be screen. Blur I'm going to move up to 50-ish, and the intensity I'm going to move it right up to don't want to go too far, I just want to just so there's a slight glow around those new stars there. Click OK. Just so there's a hint of glow around those new star lines. So again, at this point, or even before I did the effects, I suppose you could have exported that version, and now after adding the effects you can export this version. So that's now got, what's it, 3 different versions already of this skyline. So what I'm going to do now is come up to Layers and then Merge, and then Merge Visible. So now all these layers are joined together and it is one image. Now we're going to do is to sort of add some nebula images, clouds. Because if this was like the picture of my house, you probably, especially here in England, you wouldn't necessarily see nebula. But if you want to do like a spaceship type image, you know, out in space, and you've got planets and what have you, you could and would see like nebulas. And so we're going to now make those. Now what we're going to need for this is to make a new blank layer once more, and then we're going to come up to Effects, Other, and Plasma. Now the plasma effect is it varies greatly depending on how you move these sliders, and we're looking I'm looking for a sort of patchy clouds. So I'm going to set the gain on about 90, 95, 96, something like that, and the seed I'm going to set on 73. I've written down here, but I'm guessing anywhere around that area. We go 73, and then click OK. So I've got a fairly patchy cloud, so it's not going to affect the whole image. And now all I need to do is change the blending mode. Now in the digital photo tutorial, they set their blending mode to color dodge, which isn't an option that we have with PhotoPlus. So I mean overlay is okay, but I found soft light to be about the best one to use. You can't necessarily see anything at the moment. I mean, it has affected those areas that we'd already had a slight nebula type effect on. So now we want to do is to click and highlight the background layer, and now we're going to select the brush tool or paintbrush tool, and we're going to pick a new color to paint onto this, and I'm going to go for something in the blue range. Maybe about there. Just click about there, roughly there. And I want a soft edge brush, which is what I have here, but you can alter this by the hardness. If it's up to 100, it will be a hard edge brush, and it's down to 0, be a soft edge brush. So a soft edge brush, and I'm going to have an opacity quite low, somewhere between 5 and 10. I'll leave it on 8, and a brush size of I'll just reduce this size slightly. There we go, 10 to 370, but around about the 400 mark would be about right. And then if I just randomly click, I think that opacity might still be a bit high. Let's reduce that down a bit more to 5. Yeah, so you can randomly click around, and it's only going to affect where there is more cloud in this layer. So because I've made it patchy, it will not always affect every area, because there's obviously no cloud or plasma cloud in that area. There we go. So then you can pick another colour. Say we already got a bit of yellow. Let's go with a bit of red. Let's try slightly. Let's try that one. So the more you click in a certain area, that's going to get darker and darker. So now we have a bit of yellow, we've got a bit of blue, a bit of red. I mean, I don't know for sure what the colours of Nebula are, but whenever you're happy with the end result, you can just stop at that point, and again export it to save your image. You could also add a hue saturation slider, and you could boost those colours that you've added, or if you think it's a bit too much, you can just drop them back a little bit with the saturation slider. So it's a sort of, the effect is probably better to reduce rather than increase, in my opinion, because it just makes that effect look a bit subtler. So again, and then you could export this, so you could end up with 4 or 5 different versions of a starry sky. So basically that was the end of the PhotoPlus tutorial. You could merge those layers down, and then select it all, come to the image that you have pre-made with the sky already removed. I'll just duplicate that level, highlight the level layer below, and then paste. Where's it gone? I hate it when it does this. I've selected all that, and then edit, copy, come to this one, and edit, paste as a new layer, and then I'll come to the deform tool, and just you can just move this around a bit like that, and then come to the top layer again, and then add a levels adjustment, right click, clip to the layer below, so you're only adjusting this top layer, and then just darken this down however you want this. There we go. I will leave that like that. So then you have your starry sky behind what was a daytime image. So again, you could save this or export it and what have you. And that is the end of the PhotoPlus version of this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hello and welcome to the Affinity Photo version of this tutorial, looking at making a false fake starry sky for an image. I'm going to be using the same image as I did before, which was this daytime picture of this house where I've removed the sky and then made and added a nighttime sky like I did here. This is the sky that I made in the PhotoPlus tutorial that preceded this part. So now I want to look at how to do that same process in Affinity Photo. So it's pretty much the same, about 80% of it is the same way of doing things as you do in PhotoPlus, as you do in Affinity Photo, but there are some variations. So the first thing we need to do, much like in PhotoPlus, is to make a new document. So get File, New, and I'm going to make it the same size, which is 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels, 300 dots per inch, and I'm also going to leave it with a white background, so I'll just click OK. So then we just have that like that. Now on the right hand side here we have mine set up on adjustments, but the layers panel is there, and as you can see, unlike in PhotoPlus, when you make a new document there is no level here in Affinity Photo where there would have been in PhotoPlus. So the first thing we are going to need to do is to make a layer. So one of the icons along the bottom here, next to the dustbin icon, there is add pixel layer, and then that has now been added. So what we need to do is to now fill this with black. Now up here in the color tab you have the white and black options. Now these can be just switched around from being foreground to background by clicking on the actual colour itself, which is quite a neat idea. Or you can just click the little arrow above, but make sure that black is your foreground colour, and then come over to the which one's the filter off? I'm still getting used. There we go. The flood fill tool, or you can press G on the keyboard and then click into anywhere in this box, this area, to flood fill it with black. Now next we want to do is to add some noise to this, and to do this you come up to filters, noise, and then add noise. You want the intensity at 100, have Gaussian selected, and monochromatic has a tick in it, and then click apply. So after that, what you want to do is come to the layers tab, right click on that layer there and click on duplicate, or you can use the keyboard shortcut of Control plus J, and then in this box on the right here for the top layer, take the tick out, so we are hiding that, and then click on the layer below. So this is the layer that we are going to be working on, and then we're going to add some blur to this, and so we're going to come to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and have a radius of 0.5 pixels, and then click apply. And now this next part here is, in PhotoPlus I would have opened up the layers tool, not layers, levels tool, as a tool in its own right, and not use it as a layer. Now you can't really do that in Affinity Photo, or not as I've been able to discover. So there is a way around this. If we come to adjustments and you click on levels, it opens up the levels box, and if we go back to the layers, you can see it has put a levels layer here in the levels layer display area. Not levels, yeah. So I'm now going to make alterations here, and these alterations, and they don't work in quite the same way as they did in PhotoPlus, where you could move the arrows underneath the histogram. You've only really got the black, white and gamma sliders here, so moving the black slider will be similar to moving the arrows that were under the histogram, or you can just type in the level that you want, and I know that I want the black level to be 12%, the white level to be 46%. 46 is down this end. 47 will do, that's close enough. And the gamma slider, I'm going to go for 0. Let me type this in, it'll be a lot easier. 0.343. Alright, so as you can see now it's taken away a lot of those dots and just left us with a few. And now this is where I'm now going to make this a part of that layer as if it was a tool in its own right, and doing that, if you wanted to keep this as a layer in its own right, you could just click the X and it would stay there. But if you click merge, it will now make that part of the layer below. So it's very similar to using the tool in its own right, like you do in PhotoPlus. So much like I said in the PhotoPlus part of this tutorial, for me at this point I would come to File and Export, and I would export the image as it stands at the moment, so you have one version of a starry sky scene. And then once you've done that, we can then move on, and now I can highlight this top layer, put a tick in the box to make it visible, and we're going to add blur again, so it's filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and this time I'm going to move this radius slide up to 2 pixels. 2.1 is close enough. Click apply, and now we're going to open the levels tool as an adjustment. Hang on, why didn't that work? There we go. Yeah, so we've got the levels tool as it's in its own layer at the moment, and this time I'm going to type this in to be a lot easier. I'm going to have the black level at 10%, the white level at 26%, and the gamma I'm going to have at 0.302, and again I'm going to click merge. So as you can see here, we've now got a different starry sky, a lot less stars in it. But so again, like I said in the PhotoPlus tutorial, I would use export and export this image. So that's 2 different versions of a starry sky that you can use. Now you can, if like mine, your white dots are not that bright or white, you can just quickly add a brightness and contrast layer, and then just bump up the brightness so they're much more brighter and whiter, and again click merge to make it all part of that same layer. So what we need to do now is we're going to select these dots, not actually really use this layer other than for selection purposes. So I'm going to zoom in, find a nice big and bright dot, and whereas in PhotoPlus I use what's called the magic wand tool, in Affinity Photo it's called the flood select tool. So you can just press W on the keyboard or just select the tool, and I'm going to set the tolerance at roughly 50%. Make sure contiguous doesn't have a tick in it, and then come to the brightest whitest part of this dot and select it. So if I zoom out again now, as you can see, those, let's do Control and 0 to make it full size. As you can see, all those dots are now selected. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a new pixel layer above this layer that we are working on presently. So just come to the icon down here and click add pixel layer. So this is a blank layer here. I can turn off and hide this layer that is currently in the middle, and as you can see, we can now see the bottom layer and the top layer, which is blank but currently has the selection outlines still flashing. So we are now going to flood fill this layer with white, so make sure white is your foreground color, and click anywhere into that area. So then hopefully, if I've done this right, and just press Ctrl and D to remove the selection area, those dots are now part of this image. So I can now safely click on that middle layer we no longer want, right click and delete it. So we're now just working with these two layers, and once again I would say export this image as it stands, and then you have 3 different versions of a starry sky. And now we are going to merge these 2 layers down into one layer. Now in PhotoPlus you could use merge visible and they would join together, whether it was 1 layer or 10 layers, they'd all join down as long as they had a tick in them and they were visible. Now if I do that now, if I show you what I mean, if I click on merge visible in this program, it makes a new layer of the merged layers, but it still keeps those previous layers the same. So you could technically just delete these because you don't need them, as they are now all linked up there. But what I'll do, I'll press Ctrl and Z to undo that process, but what I'll do is I'll right click and I will click on merge down, and that will merge that top layer into the layer below, giving me just 1 layer to work with. So now we come on to the last and final part, which is adding the nebulae clouds. Now I did have a lot of problems with this in Affinity Photo. It was far easier in PhotoPlus. There is no sort of technically listed plasma filter, but there is something which comes under noise, which is called the Perlin noise. So that is what I'm going to do, but first of all we need to make, hope if I press the right one, a new blank layer above this. So again, just click on this icon here and then come up to filter, noise, Perlin noise, and as you can see it looks very similar. If you've watched the first part of this video, it looks very similar to what was the plasma clouds, and I don't think it works in quite the same way, but this is about the best that I could find in Affinity Photo. Again, I wanted a sort of a very patchy effect, So I've gone for settings of octaves at 16, zoom at 120.7, and persistence at 87.4. You can pick whichever settings that you are happy with. Again, this is where I get a bit confused here, because there is a blending mode option here, and they were very similar to the blending modes you have for the layers. Now they do have color dodge, which wasn't in PhotoPlus, but it was what they used in the original tutorial that I'm adapting. So I've set this at color dodge and then clicked apply. But as you can see, the blending mode for this level, although I used color dodge, is also set at normal. So what I've tried various other of these blending modes to try and get a similar feel to how it worked in PhotoPlus, but I couldn't manage it to my liking. Maybe somebody else can explain to me where I've gone wrong, but I've left it on normal, and what I did was I reduced the opacity down very low to about 7%, so I can see the cloud, the stars behind coming through this cloud area, but even then it is still a bit too much cloud. So what I then did was I picked the eraser brush tool and I set it up with an opacity of 14%, and the size was roughly 400, and then I just clicked around these clouds to help reduce and tone them down and make it a little bit more patchy, and then you can just keep clicking over certain areas to reduce it down to however you want it to look. So I will leave it at that. Right. What I want to do now is we're going to add a bit of colour. So coming up to the paintbrush tool, again I've set the hardness at, well, I've set this at 10%, which is okay for what I want to do here, and the opacity I'm going to set it lower still. We'll go down to about 4 or 5%, or 6, that would do. And now we need to pick a colour. Now I'm going to go with a blue colour first of all, and then it's just a case of adding the colour to certain areas of the sky. You can build it up. I mean, if it's building up too slowly for you, you can always increase the opacity and add a bit of colour a bit quicker this way. So I'm now going to change colour again. I'm going to go for a red. So I don't think the end result is as good as when using PhotoPlus. It's probably more my lack of knowledge and understanding of Affinity Photo, as I've been working with PhotoPlus for years, I sort of understand it better, and I've only had Affinity Photo for less than a month now. Just let you know, I did change the colour to yellow, and I'm going to make a nice big. Let me just bump this opacity up slightly. There we go. So there we have. Hopefully you can see that colour building up there, and I will leave that at that. You can build up the colour as much as you want, and you can change the opacity level if you want to make it a bit brighter or a bit more subdued. I'll leave that up to your personal tastes. And then once you've finished and got it how you like it, you can just right click on that layer and merge down, and then export it, and then you have your fourth or fifth image of a starry sky that you can use. And let me just so you come down to export, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you about like I did in the PhotoPlus tutorial, and put in this sky behind this image to give it the starry sky look. So I'll come back to this one and come up to select all, edit, copy, come to this image. I need to just duplicate this layer, highlight the bottom layer, and then edit, paste, and then come to the move tool, and then just increase its size to fit where I want it, and move it around to give me the whichever image I'm looking for. Let me leave that there, and then with the top layer, I need to add an adjustment of a levels layer, and what I'm going to do is hang on. Just alter this down, and I'm solely just going to look at the building. I know it is affecting the sky at the moment, but let me just, there's the building I want to make look like a nighttime scene. And then if I've done this correctly, when I click merge, what it should do is merge this into that layer, and then not affect. It will remove the effect from the sky area. There we go. So that is now affecting just that layer, and the sky layer has not been affected at all. So that is what that looked like being made in Affinity Photo, and that was the end result of what I did using PhotoPlus. So if you're going for the Nebula effect, I think it comes out better in PhotoPlus, in my personal opinion. It's not as noticeable in Affinity Photo, probably partly because of my lack of knowledge of this program, but hopefully you can work it out. And even if you don't want the Nebula effect, it's all well and good, because you've already got all these ready-made ones that you saved and exported earlier. So thank you for watching, and I hope this has been of some help, and goodbye.